The winter morning broke cold and gray over Manhattan, the kind of day where the sky merged seamlessly with the concrete towers that scraped against it. Frost clung to the windows of the penthouse on the Upper East Side, creating crystalline patterns that refracted the pale sunlight into 1,000 tiny prisms. Inside, the apartment was warm, heated to exactly 72 degrees, but the warmth felt hollow, artificial, incapable of reaching the cold that had settled into the bones of the man standing by the floor-to-ceiling windows. Marco Santoro was 43 years old, though the weight he carried made him feel ancient. He stood with his hands clasped behind his back, his tailored charcoal suit fitting him perfectly, his dark hair grayed at the temples in a way that suggested distinguished experience rather than age. To anyone looking at him from the street below, not that anyone could see him from this height, he would appear to be exactly what he was, a man of considerable means and influence. What they couldn't see was the exhaustion etched into the lines around his eyes, or the way his jaw was perpetually clenched, as if he were constantly bracing for impact. Behind him, the penthouse stretched out in all its carefully curated luxury, marble floors from Italy, furniture that cost more than most people's homes, art on the walls that had been acquired through channels that didn't ask questions. Everything was perfect, expensive, beautiful. Everything was meaningless. Mr. Santoro. The voice came from Vincent DiNardo, Marco's second-in-command and the closest thing he had to a friend in this world. Vincent had been with him for 20 years, through the rise, through the wars, through everything that had brought them to this moment. He stood in the doorway, his broad frame filling the space, his expression carefully neutral. "Dr. Chen is here." Marco didn't turn from the window. "Send him in, doctor." Richard Chen was the fourth child psychologist they had brought in over the past 3 months. The first had been from Colombia, highly recommended, specializing in childhood trauma. He'd lasted 2 weeks before admitting defeat. The second had come from a private practice in Connecticut, a woman with 30 years of experience and a wall full of credentials. She'd managed 3 weeks. The third had been flown in from California, a specialist in selective mutism who'd written books on the subject. He'd left after 10 days, looking more defeated than any of the others. Dr. Chen entered the living room with the kind of cautious optimism that Marco had learned to recognize and resent. They all came in thinking they would be the one to break through, to solve the puzzle, to be the hero of the story. They all left the same way, apologetic, frustrated, and secretly relieved to escape. "Mr. Santoro," Dr. Chen said, setting his leather bag down on the glass coffee table. "I've reviewed all the previous reports and I've prepared several new approaches we might try with Sophia today." Marco finally turned from the window. His dark eyes, the same eyes that could make grown men confess to things they hadn't done, that could silence a room with a single glance, were rimmed with red. "She's in her room, same as always." The hallway to Sophia's bedroom was long and lined with photographs. Marco had put them up himself in the early days after it happened. Pictures of Sophia at 3, at 4, smiling, laughing, full of the kind of joy that seemed impossible now. Sophia at her birthday party, chocolate cake smeared on her face. Sophia at the park, feeding ducks. Sophia, 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 a ghost of the child she had been, haunting the walls of this expensive mausoleum. "Dr. Burao." Chen knocked gently on her door. "Sophia? My name is Dr. Chen. I'm here to visit with you if that's all right." No response. There never was. Marco pushed the door open. The room was enormous, bigger than most apartments in the city. A canopy bed with silk sheets, shelves lined with toys that had never been touched, a window overlooking Central Park, though the curtains were always drawn, and in the center of it all, sitting on the floor in her pink pajamas, was Sophia. She was 5 years old and small for her age, with dark curls that fell past her shoulders and eyes that matched her father's, deep brown, almost black. But where Marco's eyes held hardness earned through years of difficult choices, Sophia's held nothing at all. She sat with a blank expression, her hands folded in her lap, staring at a point on the wall that held no particular interest. A doll sat beside her, ignored. A coloring book lay open nearby, its pages pristine and white. "Hello, Sophia," Dr. Chen said, lowering himself to sit on the floor a respectful distance away. "I brought something I thought you might like." He reached into his bag and pulled out a stuffed elephant, gray and soft. "His name is Peanut. Would you like to hold him?" Sophia didn't move, didn't blink, didn't acknowledge that anyone had entered the room. Marco leaned against the doorframe, his arms crossed over his chest. He'd watched this scene play out so many times now that he could predict every moment. Dr. Chen would try various techniques: play therapy, art therapy, gentle conversation, silence, music. Sophia would sit exactly as she was sitting now, unreachable, locked inside whatever place she'd retreated to 3 months ago. For an hour, Dr. Chen tried everything in his considerable arsenal. He introduced puppets, showed her picture books, sang quiet songs, simply sat with her in comfortable silence. Nothing. Sophia remained as still and unresponsive as a statue, present in body but absent in every way that mattered. Finally, Dr. Chen gathered his things and followed Marco back to the living room. Vincent was waiting there, along with a woman Marco didn't recognize. Sharp suit, briefcase, the look of someone used to difficult conversations. "This is Agent Sarah Morrison," Vincent said quietly. "FBI. She's been waiting." Marco's jaw tightened, but he nodded. This was the dance they'd been doing for months now. "Doctor, if you'll excuse us." Dr. Chen hesitated at the door. "Mr. Santoro, I know this is difficult, but—" "Don't," Marco interrupted, his voice low but firm. "Don't tell me it takes time. Don't tell me she needs patience. Don't tell me any of the things the others have told me. Just send your bill to Vincent." After Dr. Chen left, Agent Morrison opened her briefcase. "Mr. Santoro, I understand this is a sensitive situation, but we need your daughter's testimony about what she witnessed. The investigation has stalled, and without her statement—" "My daughter," Marco said, each word carefully controlled, "doesn't speak to anyone about anything. So unless you've figured out how to read minds, Agent Morrison, I don't see how I can help you. Mr. Santoro, we have reason to believe that the Moretti family was responsible for your wife's passing. But without Sophia's testimony—" "I'm aware," Marco cut her off. "Believe me, Agent Morrison, I'm very aware of who was responsible." The agent's expression hardened slightly. "If you're planning on handling this yourself—" "I'm planning," Marco said, moving to the bar and pouring himself a whiskey despite the early hour, "on taking care of my daughter. Everything else can wait." After Agent Morrison left, frustrated but unable to push further without evidence, Vincent poured himself a drink and sat down across from Marco. The two men sat in silence for a long moment, the weight of unspoken words hanging between them. "Boss," Vincent finally said, "we've tried everything. Every doctor in the city, every specialist they could recommend. Maybe it's the environment. This place, the bodyguards, the constant reminders. Maybe she needs something different." Marco stared into his glass. "What are you suggesting?" "I don't know," Vincent admitted. "Something normal. Something that doesn't feel like a prison, even a golden one. When's the last time she left this building?" "She went to see Dr. Patterson last week. I mean, really left. Went somewhere that wasn't a doctor's office or a hospital. When's the last time she did something a regular 5-year-old does?" Marco stood and walked back to the window. Below, Central Park was covered in a thin layer of snow. He could see people walking dogs, joggers braving the cold, children building snowmen with their parents, normal people living normal lives, the kind of life Sophia should have been living. "There used to be a diner," Marco said quietly. "Years ago, before all this, when I was just starting out, barely making ends meet. Little place in Queens, nothing fancy. I used to go there for coffee and eggs. It was run by this Greek family. Always smelled like fresh bread. I wonder if it's still there." Vincent stood and joined him at the window. "You want to take her to a diner?" "I want to take her somewhere I felt human once," Marco said. "Somewhere that isn't connected to any of this, somewhere normal. It's a risk in public like that." "Everything's a risk," Marco said. "But staying here, trapped in this apartment, surrounded by doctors who can't help her and agents who want to use her, that's not living. She's 5 years old, Vincent. She should be eating pancakes and making a mess and acting like a kid, not sitting in silence in a room full of toys she won't touch." Vincent nodded slowly. "I'll have the car ready tomorrow morning, and I'll arrange security. Discreet." "No," Marco said firmly. "No obvious security. I want her to feel like we're just a father and daughter getting breakfast. Can you find the place?" "Miller's Diner," it was called, on Northern Boulevard. "I'll find it," Vincent promised. That night, Marco sat in Sophia's room for hours. She had been moved to her bed by Maria, the nanny, and was sleeping fitfully under the covers. Her face, relaxed in sleep, looked almost peaceful, almost like the little girl she'd been before that terrible October evening when everything had shattered. Marco had been at a meeting when it happened. A business dinner that had run late, discussing territories and arrangements, the kind of conversation that was simultaneously boring and crucial. He'd been annoyed at missing bedtime, had planned to make it up to Sophia the next morning with her favorite breakfast, chocolate chip pancakes with way too much syrup. His phone had rung at 10:47 p.m. Vincent's voice had been tight, controlled, delivering news in the same tone he used to report any crisis, calm, efficient, devastating. There had been a breach at the house in New Jersey, where Marco's wife Isabella had been staying with Sophia. The security team had been neutralized. By the time backup arrived, Isabella was gone and Sophia was found hiding in a closet, unharmed physically but completely unresponsive. The doctors had explained it to him in clinical terms: traumatic selective mutism, post-traumatic stress disorder, dissociative symptoms. They'd used a lot of words that all meant the same thing. His daughter had witnessed something so terrible that her mind had decided the only safe response was to stop communicating entirely. In the 3 months since, Sophia had become a living ghost. She ate when food was put in front of her, but without interest. She slept, but poorly, often waking up screaming without making a sound. She followed basic instructions: get dressed, brush your teeth, come here, but with the mechanical compliance of someone going through motions rather than living. The vibrant, talkative, endlessly curious little girl who had once asked him 1,000 questions about everything from stars to dinosaurs to why the sky was blue had simply disappeared. Marco reached out and gently brushed a curl away from her forehead. "I don't know how to reach you, baby girl," he whispered. "I don't know how to bring you back, but I promise you I'm going to keep trying. Every day I'm going to keep trying." Sophia stirred slightly in her sleep, but didn't wake. The next morning dawned even colder than the day before. The weather forecast predicted snow by afternoon. Marco dressed carefully in clothes that wouldn't draw attention: jeans, a simple black sweater, a leather jacket. He looked at himself in the mirror and barely recognized the man staring back. When had he become so tired? When had the weight of his choices carved such deep lines into his face? Maria had dressed Sophia in warm clothes: leggings, a soft purple sweater, winter boots, a puffy jacket. She sat on the edge of her bed, hands folded, waiting with that same blank expression. "We're going out for breakfast," Marco told her, kneeling down to her level. "Just you and me. Would you like that?" No response, not even a flicker of recognition. Vincent had the car waiting, not the usual black SUV with tinted windows, but a regular silver sedan that could blend in anywhere. He'd also prepared a folder with information. "Miller's Diner is still there," Vincent said as he drove. "Been there 43 years. Still run by the same family. The founder passed, but his daughter Helen runs it now. They open at 6 a.m., serve breakfast and lunch. Reviews say the food's good, place is clean, neighborhood's stable. I had someone check it out yesterday, should be perfect." Marco sat in the back with Sophia, her small hand in his. Her skin was cold despite the heated car. "Did you arrange?" "2 guys will be in a car outside, just in case," Vincent said, "but they'll stay back unless there's a problem. Inside, you'll just be another dad taking his kid to breakfast." The drive from Manhattan to Queens took 40 minutes in the morning traffic. Marco watched the city change as they crossed the bridge, from the gleaming towers of wealth to the more modest neighborhoods where real people lived real lives. It had been years since he'd been in this part of the city, years since he'd needed to be anywhere that wasn't carefully controlled and secured. Miller's Diner sat on a corner, its red and white awning faded but clean. Through the windows, Marco could see booths with vinyl seats, a counter with stools, walls covered in old photographs and Greek memorabilia. A hand-painted sign in the window advertised the breakfast special: 2 eggs, bacon, toast, and coffee for $8.99. "We'll be inside," Marco told Vincent. "Give us an hour." The door chimed as they entered, releasing the smell of coffee and bacon and something sweet, cinnamon rolls maybe, or fresh-baked bread. It was warm inside, almost too warm after the cold outside. The diner was about half full, an older couple in one booth, a man reading a newspaper at the counter, a woman with a laptop near the window. Normal people doing normal things. A waitress looked up from where she was refilling coffee. She was middle-aged with kind eyes and gray-streaked hair pulled back in a practical ponytail. "Sit anywhere you like, honey," she called out. Marco chose a booth near the back, not out of habit for security exactly, but because old instincts died hard. He helped Sophia out of her jacket and settled her into the seat across from him. She sat with that same blank expression, staring at nothing. The waitress approached with menus and a smile. "Good morning. Cold one out there, isn't it? Can I start you folks off with some coffee?" "Please," Marco said, "and some orange juice for her." The waitress, her name tag read Donna, set the menus down and really looked at Sophia for the first time. Something shifted in her expression, a flicker of concern, but she kept her smile. "And what's your name, sweetheart?" Silence. "This is Sophia," Marco said quietly. She's having a quiet day." Donna's eyes met his, and in that moment, he saw understanding. Not pity, not judgment, just simple human recognition that something was wrong, and tact enough not to push. "Well, Sophia, we've got the best pancakes in Queens if you're interested. Chocolate chip, blueberry, or plain with lots of syrup. Whatever you like." Sophia didn't respond, didn't even look up. Donna nodded gently. "I'll give you folks a minute to look at the menu. Coffee and juice coming right up." As she walked away, Marco opened the menu without really seeing it. What was he doing here? What had he expected? That bringing Sophia to a diner would somehow magically fix everything? That a change of scenery would break through months of silence where trained professionals had failed? He looked at his daughter across the table. She sat perfectly still, her small hands folded in her lap, her eyes focused on a spot somewhere past his shoulder. She looked like a doll, pretty and lifeless. "Sophia," he said softly, "look at me, baby. Please." "Nothing." Donna returned with the coffee and juice, setting them down carefully. "Decided what you'd like?" "Chocolate chip pancakes for her," Marco said. "And I'll have the breakfast special, eggs over easy." "You got it, hun." They sat in silence as the diner moved around them. The older couple got up to leave, the man calling out thanks to Donna. Another customer came in, stamping snow off his boots. The woman with the laptop laughed at something on her screen. Life happening all around them while Sophia remained locked away in her silent world. When the food came, Marco arranged Sophia's plate in front of her. 3 perfect chocolate chip pancakes, whipped cream on top, butter melting on the side. The kind of breakfast that would have had her squealing with delight 6 months ago. "They look good, don't they?" he said, cutting a bite-sized piece. "Try some, Sophia. I bet they're delicious." Sophia didn't move, didn't pick up her fork, didn't even look at the food. Marco felt something crack inside his chest. He set down his fork, no longer hungry, and pressed his palms against his eyes. Not here. He couldn't break down here. Not in front of all these people. Not in front of his daughter. But the weight of the past 3 months crashed down on him all at once. The guilt, the rage, the helplessness, the desperate clawing fear that he would never get his daughter back. "Mr. Santoro." He looked up to find Vincent standing by the table, concern evident on his usually impassive face. "I'm fine," Marco said automatically, though they both knew it was a lie. He picked up his fork with a hand that shook slightly. "We're fine." But they weren't fine. Nothing was fine. And sitting in this diner, surrounded by the warmth and normalcy he'd hoped might reach his daughter, Marco felt further from a solution than ever. Sophia sat across from him, untouched pancakes cooling on her plate, as unreachable as the moon. Emma Chen wiped down the counter for the 3rd time that morning, her movements automatic after 12 years of working at Miller's Diner. The rag moved in slow, methodical circles across the worn formica, erasing coffee rings and sugar spills, restoring order to the small section of the world she could control. Outside, the sky had turned a deeper shade of gray, and the first snowflakes were beginning to drift past the window, catching the light from the neon sign that buzzed softly above the door. She glanced at the clock. 9:47 a.m. Helen would be in soon to help with the lunch rush, which meant Emma could take her break, call to check on Tyler at school, maybe sit down for 5 minutes with a cup of coffee that she didn't have to serve to anyone else. The morning crowd had thinned out, just the regulars now. Mr. Patterson at his usual spot by the window with his crossword puzzle, the couple from the flower shop 2 doors down, sharing a stack of blueberry pancakes like they did every Tuesday, and the man with the little girl in the back booth. Emma had noticed them the moment they walked in. You didn't work as a waitress for over a decade without developing a 6th sense about people. The man was clearly out of his element, dressed down but expensive, the kind of careful casual that came from someone who usually wore suits that cost more than her monthly rent. He'd chosen the back booth with the quick assessment of someone used to evaluating exits and sightlines, but it was his eyes that had caught her attention. Exhausted, desperate, the eyes of someone carrying a weight that was slowly crushing them. The little girl, though, that's what had made Emma's chest tighten. 5, maybe 6 years old. Pretty dark curls, delicate features, dressed warmly in clothes that looked brand new. But it was her stillness that sent alarm bells ringing in Emma's mind. Children weren't still like that. Children fidgeted and squirmed and asked questions and reached for things. This child sat like a statue, and there was something about her blank expression that made Emma's maternal instincts flare up with painful recognition. She knew that look, had seen it before, though in a different context on a different child's face. Donna came through from the kitchen balancing 3 plates. "Table 4 needs a refill," she said, jerking her chin toward the booth. "But the guy looks like he's about to fall apart. Might want to give him a minute." Emma glanced over. The man, Mr. Santoro, she'd heard Donna call him, was sitting with his untouched breakfast in front of him, staring at his daughter with an expression of such profound helplessness that Emma had to look away. The little girl's pancakes sat cooling on her plate, the chocolate chips beginning to harden, the whipped cream deflating into a sad puddle. "I'll take care of it," Emma said quietly. She'd worked at Miller's long enough to know that people came to diners for all sorts of reasons. Some came for the food, some came for the company, some came because diners were neutral spaces, not home, not work, somewhere in between where you could exist without the weight of expectations, and some came because they were drowning and didn't know where else to go. Emma poured fresh coffee into a carafe and made her way to the back booth. As she approached, she could hear the man's voice, low and strained. "Sophia, please, just one bite. You need to eat something, baby. Please." The girl, Sophia, didn't move, didn't even blink. "More coffee?" Emma asked gently, deliberately keeping her tone light and neutral. Marco looked up, and Emma saw the sheen in his eyes that meant he was fighting hard to keep his composure. "Yeah, thank you." She refilled his cup, her movements slow and careful. "How are those pancakes, Sophia? Not too sweet?" No response. Emma had expected that. She studied the untouched plate for a moment, then made a decision. "You know what? I think maybe these got a little cold. How about I bring you a fresh stack and maybe—" She paused, thinking quickly. "Maybe I could make them extra special. What do you think?" Sophia's eyes flickered slightly, the first hint of a reaction Emma had seen. It was barely there, just the tiniest shift in focus, but Emma was watching for it. "I'll be right back," she said, picking up the plate. In the kitchen, Helen's husband George was working the grill, the sizzle and pop of bacon filling the air. Emma grabbed a fresh plate and assembled 3 new pancakes, still warm from the griddle. She added a generous dollop of whipped cream, a pat of butter, and then hesitated, her hand hovering over the chocolate syrup. Tyler had been 3 when her world fell apart. 3 years old, with his gap-toothed smile and his obsession with dinosaurs and his habit of drawing hearts on everything. Her notebooks, the bathroom mirror, napkins, the backs of receipts. "It means I love you, Mama," he'd say, pressing his chocolate-smudged fingers to her cheek. Hearts mean love. The accident had been quick. A drunk driver running a red light on a sunny Tuesday afternoon. Tyler's car seat had done its job. The impact hadn't taken him immediately. He'd lasted 6 hours in the hospital, long enough for Emma to hold his hand and sing him every lullaby she knew, long enough for her to tell him all the things she needed him to know, not long enough for any of it to matter. Emma closed her eyes, pushing down the grief that could still ambush her even after 5 years. Not now. This wasn't about her. This was about a little girl who needed something, anything, to remind her that the world could still hold gentle things. She picked up the chocolate syrup bottle and, with careful movements, drew a small heart on the edge of Sophia's plate. Not perfect. Her hands weren't steady enough for perfection, but recognizable. A simple gesture, a tiny offering of kindness. When she returned to the table, Marco was on his phone, speaking in low, tense tones to someone named Vincent. He stopped mid-sentence when he saw Emma approaching. "Here we go," Emma said, setting the fresh plate down in front of Sophia. Brand new pancakes, still nice and warm. Sophia's eyes dropped to the plate. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then, and Emma would remember this moment for the rest of her life, Sophia's gaze locked onto the chocolate heart. Her expression didn't change exactly, but something shifted. Some tiny light flickered behind her eyes. Emma felt her breath catch. She glanced at Marco, who had frozen with his phone still pressed to his ear, watching his daughter with an intensity that was almost painful to witness. Sophia reached out slowly, her small hand hovering over the plate. Her index finger extended, trembling slightly, and touched the chocolate heart. Just touched it, tracing the curved line Emma had drawn. "It's a heart," Emma said softly, crouching down beside the booth so she was at Sophia's eye level. Do you know what hearts mean? Sophia's finger continued tracing the chocolate shape, around and around following the same path. Her lips parted slightly. The first break in the blank mask she'd been wearing. Hearts mean someone is thinking about you. Emma continued, her voice gentle. Hearts mean you're not alone. Hearts mean… She paused, throat tight. Hearts mean love. Sophia looked up. Their eyes met. Emma's soft green to Sophia's deep brown. And for just a second, Emma saw past the wall of silence to the terrified child hiding behind it. A child who'd seen something terrible. A child who'd stopped trusting the world to be safe. A child who was drowning in silence because words had become too dangerous. Emma knew that fear. Had felt it herself in the days and weeks and months after Tyler's accident, when speaking felt like an admission that the world kept turning even though her son was gone. When silence felt like the only loyal response to a reality too cruel to acknowledge. You don't have to talk, Emma said quietly, just to Sophia, though she knew Marco was listening to every word. That's okay. Sometimes words are too hard, but maybe you could try the pancakes. They're really good, and they're warm, and warm things help, even when everything else feels cold. Sophia looked down at her plate again. Her hand moved from the chocolate heart to her fork, slowly. So slowly that Emma held her breath. She picked it up, cut a small piece of pancake, raised it to her mouth, and took a bite. Marco made a sound like he'd been punched. Emma glanced up at him and saw tears streaming freely down his face now, his phone forgotten on the table, both hands pressed to his mouth as he watched his daughter eat. Sophia chewed mechanically, swallowed, then took another bite. Not with enthusiasm. There was no joy in it, no pleasure, but she was eating. After 3 months of having to be coaxed to consume even a few mouthfuls, she was eating on her own. Emma stood up slowly, not wanting to break the moment. I'll let you folks have some privacy, she said. But if you need anything at all, just wave, okay? She made it back to the counter before her own tears started. Donna looked up from the coffee she was pouring and immediately set down the pot. Hey, Donna said, concern creasing her face. You okay? Emma nodded, wiping her eyes quickly. Yeah, sorry, just that little girl. There's something going on there. I figured, Donna said. You want to talk about it? No, Emma said. But thank you. I think I need to take my break. She went to the small office in the back, really just a closet with a desk and a filing cabinet, and sat down heavily in the creaky chair. Her hands were shaking. She pressed them flat against her thighs and focused on breathing, on not letting the memories swallow her whole. The grief counselor she'd seen after Tyler's accident had told her that trauma changed you, that you could either let it make you bitter or let it make you more compassionate. Emma had chosen compassion, though there were days when bitterness felt like it would be easier, days when seeing other people's children, healthy, alive, talking, laughing, felt like knives to the chest, days when the unfairness of it all made her want to scream. But then there were moments like this. Moments when she could use her pain to recognize someone else's, when she could offer a tiny gesture of kindness that might matter, when she could draw a chocolate heart on a plate and watch it reach a child that trained professionals hadn't been able to touch. Maybe that was why she was still here, still working double shifts at a diner, still getting up every morning even though her son never would. Maybe this was what Tyler's life had meant, that Emma could recognize suffering and try to ease it, even in small ways. She allowed herself 5 minutes, then washed her face in the tiny bathroom, reapplied her ponytail and went back out to the floor. The diner had gotten busier. A group of construction workers had taken over 2 tables, and the lunch prep was starting to ramp up. Emma fell into the familiar rhythm of work, taking orders, pouring coffee, calling out requests to George in the kitchen, but she kept one eye on the back booth, where Marco and Sophia still sat. Sophia had eaten about half her pancakes, more than she'd probably eaten at one sitting in months based on her father's reaction. Marco had barely touched his own food, but he was sitting straighter now, some of the desperate helplessness replaced by something that looked almost like hope. When they were ready to leave, Marco approached the counter where Emma was ringing up another customer. He waited patiently until she was free, then met her eyes. I don't know what you did, he said, his voice rough, but thank you. Thank you. I just drew a heart, Emma said simply. Sometimes that's enough. How much do I owe you? Emma glanced at the register. $18.47. Marco pulled out his wallet, but instead of counting out bills, he laid down 100. Keep the change. Sir, that's too much. It's not enough. Marco said firmly. Believe me, it's nowhere near enough. He hesitated, then added, would it be all right if we came back? Tomorrow, maybe? Emma smiled. We're here every day. Same time, same pancakes. The heart, though, Marco said, and there was something almost desperate in his voice now. Would you mind doing that again? Emma's smile widened. I can do hearts. Hearts are easy. Something passed between them in that moment. An understanding, perhaps. A recognition that they were both people who'd been broken by loss and were doing their best to keep functioning despite it. Emma didn't know his story and he didn't know hers, but they both knew what it looked like when someone was barely holding on. Tomorrow then, Marco said. He looked over at Sophia, who was standing by the door with Vincent. When had he come in? Staring at nothing again. Same time. After they left, Donna sidled up next to Emma. That was a hell of a tip. Yeah, Emma said, tucking the money into the register and pulling out her share for the jar they kept under the counter. You know who that was, right? Donna asked, her voice low. Marco Santoro. I've seen his picture in the papers. Well, let's just say he's not exactly in a legitimate line of work, if you know what I mean. Emma watched through the window as Marco helped Sophia into a silver sedan. I know what silence looks like, she said quietly. And I know what it looks like when someone would do anything, absolutely anything, to help their child. That's what I saw. Just be careful, Donna warned. Men like that, they're dangerous. Maybe, Emma agreed. But right now his daughter needs help, and I can help her, so I'm going to. That night, in her small apartment in Astoria, Emma made dinner for one, pasta with jarred sauce, nothing fancy, and ate it while watching the snow fall outside her window. Her apartment was modest but clean, decorated with the kind of generic furniture that came from rental catalogs and clearance sales. The only personal touches were the photographs on the bookshelf, Tyler at various ages, smiling, laughing, alive in captured moments that would never happen again. I met a little girl today, Emma said to the photographs, like she did most nights. She reminds me of you. Not how you looked, but she's lost, Tyler. She's so lost, and I think maybe I can help her find her way back. Would you like that? I think you would. You always wanted to help people. The snow continued to fall, soft and silent, covering the city in white. Emma finished her dinner, washed her plate, and went to bed early. She had another shift at 6 a.m., and something told her that tomorrow was going to be important. She was right. Marco Santoro was not a man who left things to chance. In his world, information was currency, and ignorance could get you ended. So when he left Miller's diner that first morning with Sophia having eaten half a plate of pancakes, more food than she'd consumed voluntarily in 3 months, his first call was to Vincent. I need everything on the Waitress, he said as the sedan merged into traffic. Emma Chen, everything. Background, family, financials, social media, parking tickets. I want to know who she is. Vincent didn't question it. He never did. I'll have it by tonight. In the back seat, Sophia sat in her usual silence, but something was different. Her fingers were moving, tracing invisible patterns on her leg. Marco watched her carefully, afraid to hope, afraid to believe that one chocolate heart drawn by a stranger could be the key that unlocked his daughter's prison. The file arrived at 8 p.m., delivered by courier to the penthouse. Marco poured himself a whiskey and settled into his leather chair to read, expecting to find, he wasn't sure what, some angle, some explanation for why a random waitress had succeeded where specialists had failed. What he found was simpler and more devastating than he'd anticipated. Emma Louise Chen, age 37, born in Sacramento, moved to New York 12 years ago, employed at Miller's Diner for the past 11 years, also worked part-time at a bookstore in Astoria, divorced 8 years ago, amicable split, no drama. One son, Tyler Chen, born March 15, 2015, passed away August 22, 2020 in a traffic accident. The driver had been intoxicated, lost control, ran a red light. Tyler was 3 years old. Marco set down the file and pressed his palms against his eyes. The universe had a cruel sense of irony. Of all the diners in all of New York, he'd walked into one where the waitress knew exactly what it felt like to lose a child. Not in the same way, Sophia was still alive, still breathing, but Emma Chen understood the particular devastation of having a child's light extinguished. He picked up his phone and stared at it for a long moment before calling Vincent again. Did you read the file? Marco asked. Yeah, boss, she's clean. No connections, no debts, no red flags. Just a working woman trying to get by. Her son. I saw that, Vincent said quietly. Hell of a thing. Marco walked to the window, looking out at the city lights. She doesn't want anything from us. She's not working an angle. Doesn't look like it. Some people are just good, I guess, even when life gives them every reason not to be. We're going back tomorrow, Marco said. And the day after that, as long as it takes. You think the heart thing will work again? I don't know, Marco admitted. But it's the first thing that's reached her in 3 months. So yeah, we're going back. They established a routine. Every morning at 9:30 a.m., Marco and Sophia would arrive at Miller's diner. They always took the same booth in the back. Emma always served them, and she always drew a small chocolate heart on Sophia's plate. The first week, Sophia ate her pancakes with the same mechanical motions, but she ate them. That alone was a victory. Marco watched his daughter like a hawk, cataloging every tiny change. On day 3, Sophia's fingers traced the chocolate heart before she started eating. On day 5, she looked up at Emma when the plate was set down. On day 7, the corner of her mouth twitched. Not quite a smile, but something. Emma never pushed. She never asked Sophia questions directly or tried to force conversation. She simply existed as a gentle, steady presence. Sometimes she'd sit in the booth across from Sophia for a few minutes during slow periods, not saying much, just being there. Sometimes she'd hum softly while wiping down nearby tables. Sometimes she'd bring crayons and leave them on the table without comment. It was on day 9 that Sophia picked up a crayon. Marco had been checking his phone, a message from Vincent about business he could barely focus on. When he heard the soft scratch of wax on paper, he looked up to find Sophia drawing on the paper placemat, her small hand moving in careful, deliberate strokes. His heart seized. She was drawing a house. Simple, childlike, the kind of picture any 5-year-old might make. A square with a triangle roof, a door, windows. But then she added stick figures, 3 of them. 1 tall, 1 medium, 1 small. Emma appeared at the table as if summoned, 2 coffee mugs in hand. She glanced at the drawing and her expression softened. "That's a beautiful house," she said, setting down Marco's refill. "Who lives there?" Sophia's hand hesitated over the paper, then continued. She drew a sun in the corner, a tree, a dog. Each addition felt significant, weighted with meaning that Marco couldn't quite decipher. "You know," Emma said, sliding into the booth across from Sophia, "I like to draw too. Not as good as you, but I try." She picked up a crayon, blue, and started drawing on her own section of the placemat. A simple flower. When I'm sad, drawing helps. It's like the feelings that are too big for words can fit into pictures. Does that make sense? Sophia looked up at Emma, really looked at her and nodded. Just once, just barely, but it was a nod. It was acknowledgement. It was communication. Marco felt his throat constrict. Vincent, sitting at the counter pretending to read a newspaper, caught his eye and gave the smallest nod of recognition. They were witnessing something important. "If you want," Emma continued, her voice soft and careful, "you could draw more, anything you want to draw, and I'll sit here with you while you do. Would that be okay?" Sophia picked up the red crayon. Her hand moved across the paper, and Marco watched with growing dread as she drew dark shapes, shadows. Her hand pressed harder, the wax leaving thick, angry marks. She drew a figure, tall, menacing, and then covered it in red. More red, red everywhere. Emma's hand covered Sophia's gently, stopping the frantic movements. "It's okay," she whispered. "You're safe now. You're safe." Sophia's hand was shaking. She dropped the crayon and looked up at Emma with eyes that were suddenly full of tears. The first tears Marco had seen from her since that terrible night. "Do you want to stop?" Emma asked. Sophia shook her head. She picked up the black crayon and drew more. A woman, lying down, more red. Her movements became jerky, desperate, and Marco realized with horror that she was drawing what she'd seen, what she'd witnessed, what had broken her. "Sophia," he said, his voice cracking. "Baby, you don't have to." But Emma caught his eye and shook her head slightly. "Let her," she mouthed. Sophia drew and drew. The story spilled out on the placemat in crude, heartbreaking images. A house, people, shadows, violence, hiding, and then in the corner a small figure in what looked like a closet, tears streaming down its face. When she was done, Sophia set down the crayon and stared at her drawing. Her whole body was trembling. Emma reached across the table and gently took Sophia's hands in hers. "Thank you for showing me," she said. "That must have been so scary. You were so brave." Sophia's lips moved. No sound came out, but Marco could read the word. Mama. Your mama, Emma said, and there were tears in her eyes now too. You miss her so much. Sophia nodded and then, finally, after 3 months of silence, she began to cry. Real, wrenching sobs that shook her small frame. Emma moved around to Sophia's side of the booth and pulled her into her arms, holding her while she cried, rocking her gently. It's okay, Emma murmured. Let it out. It's okay to cry. It's okay to be sad. It's okay. Marco sat frozen, watching this stranger comfort his daughter in a way he hadn't been able to. Part of him wanted to pull Sophia away, to be the one holding her, but he recognized that this moment belonged to them, this woman who understood grief, and this child who needed someone who understood. The diner had gone quiet. The other customers were carefully not looking, but Marco could feel their awareness, their sympathy. Donna appeared at the booth with a box of tissues and set it down without a word, then disappeared again. After a long time, Sophia's sobs quieted to hiccups, then to shaky breathing. She didn't pull away from Emma, just rested against her like she was too exhausted to sit up on her own. Better? Emma asked softly. Sophia nodded against her shoulder. Do you want to go home and rest? Another nod. Emma looked at Marco. I think she's had enough for today. Marco nodded, unable to speak. He pulled out his wallet, but Emma stopped him. No, she said firmly. No money. I'm not doing this for money. I need to pay you something. You need to take care of your daughter, Emma interrupted. That's all you need to do. Bring her back tomorrow if you want, or don't. But this isn't about money. Why are you doing this? Marco asked, the question he'd been holding back for days finally escaping. You don't know us. We're strangers. Why do you care? Emma's expression was complicated, sad and fierce at the same time. Because I know what it's like to lose a child. And if I can help keep you from losing yours, even though she's still here, then maybe Tyler's life meant something. Maybe his loss can help someone else's found. Marco's vision blurred. You lost 5 years ago, Emma said. Car accident. He was 3, and for a long time I didn't think I'd survive it, but I did. And I learned that the only way to live with that kind of pain is to use it to recognize pain in others, to help where you can, to draw chocolate hearts on plates when a little girl needs to remember that the world can still hold gentle things. Marco carefully folded the placemat with Sophia's drawing and tucked it into his jacket. I'm sorry. For your loss. I'm so sorry. I know, Emma said. And I'm sorry for yours too. Even though your daughter is still breathing, you've lost something. I can see it. Will you be here tomorrow? Marco asked. I work every day, Emma said. Same shift, same chocolate hearts. That night, Marco spread Sophia's drawing on his desk and studied it. Vincent stood beside him, both men silent as they examined the crude but unmistakable images. That's definitely the Moretti brothers, Vincent said finally, pointing to the tall, menacing figures. The one with the scar, that could be Antonio. He always wears that hat. And this, Marco touched the red-covered figure lying down, is Isabella. We knew they were responsible, Vincent said carefully. But now we have confirmation. From Sophia. She saw everything, Marco said, his voice hollow. She was there. She watched them. He couldn't finish the sentence. The FBI will want this, Vincent said. I know. Marco stared at the drawing. But not yet. Sophia's just starting to process this. I won't put her through interrogations and testimony until she's ready, until she's stronger. Boss, every day we wait is a day Sophia gets to heal, Marco interrupted. The Morettis aren't going anywhere. They think they got away with it. Let them think that a little longer. Vincent nodded. And the waitress? Emma? What about her? She's becoming important to Sophia. That makes her a liability. If anyone wanted to get to you, no one knows about her, Marco said firmly. And no one will. We keep the security discreet. We don't change our routine. And we don't do anything that makes Emma or that diner a target. Understood? Understood. The days turned into weeks. Sophia continued to draw, each session revealing more of what she'd witnessed. Emma sat with her through all of it, never flinching, never showing horror at the violence depicted in childish crayon strokes. She just held space for Sophia's trauma, let her express it at her own pace in her own way. And slowly, gradually, Sophia began to come back. It started with small things. On day 15, she made eye contact with Marco voluntarily. On day 18, she reached for his hand in the car. On day 21, she pointed at something she wanted, a book in a shop window, The first time she'd expressed desire for anything in months. But she still didn't speak. The words were locked away, too dangerous to release. Emma never pushed. She introduced other forms of communication, taught Sophia simple hand signals, thumbs up for yes, thumbs down for no, showed her how to point to pictures when she needed something, created a small notebook where Sophia could draw when words felt too hard. Marco watched all of this with a mixture of gratitude and something else, something uncomfortable that he finally recognized as guilt. This woman was giving his daughter something precious, patience, understanding, unconditional acceptance, and she was doing it for nothing. No payment, no recognition, no benefit to herself, just pure, selfless compassion. It was day 24 when everything changed. They were at the diner, the morning routine as established as always. Sophia was drawing while Emma refilled Marco's coffee. The drawing today was different, lighter. Sophia was sketching flowers, butterflies, things that weren't dark or violent. Emma smiled. "Those are beautiful, Sophia. I love the butterflies." Sophia looked up at her. Her lips moved, forming words. No sound came out, but Emma could read them. "Thank you." "You're welcome, sweetheart," Emma said, her voice thick with emotion. Then Sophia turned to Marco. Her eyes met his, really met his, with recognition and presence and consciousness. Her lips moved again. "I love you, Daddy." Marco's control shattered. He reached across the table and pulled his daughter into his arms, holding her like he was afraid she'd disappear. "I love you too, baby girl. So much. So much." Sophia wrapped her thin arms around his neck and held on tight. When Marco finally released her, he looked at Emma. "How can I ever thank you?" "You don't need to," Emma said. But Marco was already shaking his head. "Please," he said, "let me do something. Anything." Emma was quiet for a moment, then said, "Tell me what happened. I've seen what Sophia drew. I know she witnessed something terrible, but I don't know the full story, and I think I need to understand." Marco glanced at Vincent, who gave a subtle nod. They'd kept Emma at arm's length deliberately, not wanting to involve her in their world. But she was already involved. She'd been involved the moment she drew that first chocolate heart. "Not here," Marco said. "Can you meet us somewhere, after your shift?" Emma hesitated, then nodded. "There's a park near here. Astoria Park. I'll be there at 3. The park was cold, the bare trees skeletal against the gray sky. Emma sat on a bench overlooking the water, her hands wrapped around a cup of coffee from a nearby vendor. When Marco arrived, without Sophia, she noticed, he sat down beside her, maintaining a respectful distance. For a long moment, neither spoke. Then Marco began to talk. He told her about Isabella, not his wife. They'd been separated for 2 years before her passing, but Sophia's mother. How she'd taken Sophia to the house in New Jersey for a weekend visit. How Marco's world, the world he'd built through choices he couldn't take back, had followed them there. How the Moretti family, in an attempt to send a message, had breached security and done the unthinkable. Sophia was supposed to be asleep, Marco said, his voice hollow. But she'd come downstairs for water. She saw everything. And when they realized she was there, he couldn't finish. But they didn't, Emma said quietly. No, she ran, hid in a closet. The security team arrived minutes later, but he shook his head. Isabella was already gone, and Sophia had retreated somewhere we couldn't reach her. Emma was quiet, processing. And the people responsible? Still out there, Marco said. The FBI knows who did it. I know who did it. But without Sophia's testimony, there's no case. Just suspicion. She's not ready for that, Emma said firmly. Testimony means reliving it. Means strangers asking her questions, making her remember in detail. She needs more time. I know, Marco said. I'm not going to push her. Her healing is more important than revenge. Emma looked at him sharply. Is it? Really? Because you don't seem like the kind of man who lets things go. Marco met her gaze. I'm not, he admitted. But I'm also a father. And right now my daughter needs me to be that more than she needs me to be. What I am. And what are you, Mr. Santoro? You know what I am, Marco said quietly. You're a smart woman. You've probably figured it out by now. I've figured out that you're a man who loves his daughter, Emma said. Everything else is just details. They sat in silence for a while, watching the water. Thank you, Marco said finally, for everything. For seeing her when no one else could, for being patient, for caring. I told you why I'm doing this, Emma said. Tyler, Marco said. I read about him. I'm sorry. Emma smiled sadly. Everyone's always sorry. But sorry doesn't change anything. It doesn't bring him back. It doesn't make the pain stop. She paused. But helping Sophia? That does something. It makes his life matter. It makes the pain useful. You're an extraordinary person, Emma Chen. No, Emma said. I'm just someone who understands. And sometimes that's all anyone needs. Someone who understands. On day 31, exactly 1 month after that first chocolate heart, Sophia whispered her first words aloud. They were sitting in the booth at Miller's diner. Emma had just set down Sophia's pancakes with the now customary chocolate heart when Sophia looked up at her. They hurt Mommy, she whispered, her voice rusty from disuse but clear. They hurt her, and she wouldn't wake up. The diner seemed to stop. Emma knelt beside the booth, taking Sophia's hands. I know, sweetheart, I'm so sorry that happened. I tried to help her, Sophia continued, tears streaming down her face. But I was too small. I couldn't help her. You did help her, Emma said firmly. You survived. You're here. That's what she would have wanted, for you to be safe. Sophia threw her arms around Emma's neck, and Emma held her while she cried. Real, healing tears this time, not the desperate sobs from before. Marco watched them, and for the first time in 3 months he felt something like hope. Real hope. Not the desperate, grasping hope of a drowning man, but the solid hope that came from seeing actual progress. His daughter was coming back. She was broken, yes. Traumatized, certainly. But she was speaking. She was feeling. She was healing. And it was all because of a chocolate heart drawn by a waitress who understood grief. 2 weeks after Sophia spoke her first words at the diner, Agent Sarah Morrison received an unexpected phone call. Marco Santoro's attorney requested a meeting, not at the FBI field office, but at a neutral location, a conference room at a respected law firm in Midtown Manhattan, where everything could be documented and official. Morrison arrived with her partner, Agent David Reeves, and a child trauma specialist named Dr. Patricia Hoffman. They'd been briefed on Sophia's condition, on the months of silence, on the failed attempts by countless professionals to reach her. Morrison had honestly given up hope of ever getting the testimony they needed to build a case against the Moretti organization. When Marco Santoro walked in with his daughter, Morrison barely recognized the child from the files. Sophia still looked fragile, too thin, too pale, shadows under her eyes that spoke of difficult nights, but she was present. Her hand was clasped in her father's, and while she stayed close to him, there was awareness in her eyes that hadn't been there before. Behind them came someone Morrison hadn't expected, Emma Chen, the waitress from Queens. She carried a small bag and wore an expression of protective determination that made it clear she wasn't just a bystander. Thank you for agreeing to meet us here, Marco's attorney began, a sharp woman named Catherine Walsh who specialized in difficult cases. My client understands the importance of Sophia's testimony to your investigation. However, there are conditions. Morrison exchanged a glance with Reeves. What kind of conditions? Sophia will give her statement today in full, but she does so with Emma Chen present. Ms. Chen has been instrumental in Sophia's recovery and has earned her trust in a way that, no disrespect to Dr. Hoffman, strangers haven't. Additionally, this statement will be recorded and can be used in legal proceedings, but Sophia will not be required to testify in person unless absolutely necessary. If courtroom testimony becomes unavoidable, accommodations will be made for her age and trauma. That's not, Morrison started, but Dr. Hoffman touched her arm. Actually, Agent Morrison, those are reasonable requests given the child's condition. Having a trusted support person present often helps traumatized children feel safe enough to share difficult experiences, and video testimony is increasingly accepted in cases involving minors, especially in situations like this. Morrison looked at Sophia, who was watching her with those solemn, dark eyes. This child had witnessed unspeakable things. If they could get her statement, a real, detailed statement, they could take down one of the most dangerous criminal organizations in the city. The Moretti family had been operating with impunity for decades, and Isabella Santoro's case was just the latest in a long line of violence that had gone unpunished. All right, Morrison agreed. Let's do this carefully and by the book. They arranged the conference room thoughtfully. Sophia sat in a comfortable chair with Emma beside her. Dr. Hoffman positioned herself where Sophia could see her but not feel crowded. Marco sat slightly behind his daughter, close enough to provide support but not in her direct line of sight. Doctor, Hoffman had suggested this, explaining that children sometimes felt pressure to protect their parents and might hold back if they could see their father's reactions. A camera was set up to record everything. Catherine Walsh made sure all the legal protocols were followed, and then when everyone was ready, Morrison began. "Sophia, my name is Sarah. I'm here to listen to anything you want to tell me about what happened to your mom. You don't have to rush. You can take breaks whenever you need to. And Emma is right here with you the whole time, okay?" Sophia looked at Emma, who squeezed her hand gently. "You're safe," Emma said softly. "And you're so brave. Just tell them what you remember, in your own words." Sophia's voice was quiet at first, barely above a whisper, but as she began to talk, the words came easier. She described the house in New Jersey, how she and her mother had gone there for a quiet weekend, how she'd been in bed but came downstairs because she was thirsty, how she'd heard voices, angry voices, and had hidden behind the kitchen door. "There were 3 men," Sophia said, her small hands twisting in her lap. "Big men. They were yelling at Mommy. She told them to leave. She said Daddy wasn't there and they needed to go." "Can you describe what the men looked like?" Morrison asked gently. Sophia nodded. She described them in the simple but specific way children often do. One had a scar on his face like a lightning bolt. One wore a hat like cowboys wear. One had a tattoo on his neck, like a snake. Details that matched perfectly with the Moretti brothers, Antonio, Giuseppe, and Marco. No relation to Sophia's father, just an unfortunate coincidence of names. "What happened next?" Dr. Hoffman prompted when Sophia paused. Sophia's voice got quieter. "They were mean to Mommy. They said bad words. They said Daddy needed to learn a lesson, and Mommy said, 'You can't hurt me, my daughter is upstairs.' But they just laughed." Emma's hand tightened on Sophia's. Marco, behind them, had gone perfectly still. One of them, the one with the scar, he pushed Mommy. She fell down. And then, Sophia's voice broke. "And then he had a thing, a black thing, and there was a loud noise and Mommy—" "It's okay," Emma said quickly, seeing Sophia's distress mounting. "You don't have to describe that part if it's too hard." But Sophia shook her head. "I have to. For Mommy." She took a shaky breath. The loud noise happened and Mommy fell down again and she didn't get up. There was red everywhere, so much red, and I wanted to help her but I was scared. I was so scared. "What did you do?" Morrison asked, her own voice thick with emotion. I ran to the closet in the hallway and I hid. I heard them talking. One said, "What about the kid?" And the one with the scar said, "Leave her. She's just a kid, she didn't see nothing." But I did see. I saw everything. "How long were you in the closet?" "I don't know. A long time. Until the nice police came, but Mommy—" Sophia's tears spilled over. "Mommy wouldn't wake up. I tried to talk to her when they let me out, but she wouldn't wake up." The room was silent except for Sophia's quiet crying. Morrison had to clear her throat several times before she could continue with her questions. She kept them simple, focused, asking Sophia to describe the men again, to remember any other details, what they wore, what they said, anything that might be useful. Sophia answered everything as best she could. Her testimony was devastating in its simplicity and clarity. This wasn't a confused recollection or a traumatized blur. This was a clear-eyed account from a child who'd witnessed her mother's final moments and had carried that weight in silence for months. When they were finished, Morrison turned off the camera and sat back. "Sophia, you were incredibly brave today. What you told us is going to help us make sure those bad men can't hurt anyone else. Thank you." Sophia looked at Emma. "Can we go home now?" "Yes, sweetheart," Emma said. "You did so well. I'm so proud of you." Outside the conference room, Morrison pulled Marco aside. "Mr. Santoro, I need to be clear with you. This testimony gives us what we need to move forward with arrests and prosecution. But I need your word that you'll let the justice system handle this. I know your inclinations, but if you take matters into your own hands, you'll compromise the entire case." Marco's expression was unreadable. "My daughter just relived the worst moment of her life to help you build your case, Agent Morrison. That took more courage than anything I've ever done. I'm not going to let her bravery be wasted. You have my word. I'll let you do your job." Morrison studied him for a long moment, then nodded. "We'll move fast. The arrests will happen within 48 hours. And Mr. Santoro, I am sorry. For your loss. For what your daughter went through. I'm sorry." Marco just nodded. There was nothing to say to that. The arrests made headlines. The Moretti brothers were taken into custody and coordinated raids across 3 states. The evidence was overwhelming. Sophia's testimony combined with forensic evidence and surveillance footage that the FBI had been collecting for months. The case was airtight. The most dangerous criminal organization in the region was finally going to face justice. But Marco Santoro took no satisfaction in it. He'd spent his entire adult life in a world where violence was currency and power was everything. He'd built an empire through choices that kept him awake at night. Choices he'd justified by telling himself he was providing for his family, protecting his interests, maintaining order in a chaotic world. And where had it gotten him? His wife was gone. His daughter had been traumatized, and he'd been powerless to protect either of them. He stood in his penthouse looking out at the city and felt nothing but emptiness. "Boss," Vincent's voice came from behind him. "The Moretti territories are in chaos. With all three brothers in custody, there's going to be a power vacuum. We could—" "No," Marco said quietly. "What?" "I said no." Marco turned to face his oldest friend. "I'm done, Vincent." Vincent's expression shifted from confusion to concern. "What are you talking about?" "Done with what?" "All of it. The business. The territories. The life." Marco gestured at the expensive apartment around them. "What's the point of any of this? I have more money than I could spend in 3 lifetimes, and my daughter spent 3 months unable to speak because of the world I built." "That wasn't your fault." "It was exactly my fault," Marco interrupted, his voice hard. "Isabella wasn't my wife anymore, but she was Sophia's mother, and she's gone because I made enemies. Sophia witnessed her passing because I built a life where that kind of violence is just business as usual. How many other children have lost parents because of decisions I've made? How many other families have been destroyed?" Vincent was quiet for a long moment. "So what are you going to do?" "I'm going to be a father," Marco said. "A real father. Not someone who throws money at problems or surrounds his kid with bodyguards and therapists. I'm going to be present. I'm going to be safe. I'm going to build a life where Sophia can heal and grow up without fear." "That's not as easy as it sounds," Vincent warned. "You can't just walk away. There are obligations, agreements, people who depend on—" "I know," Marco said. "That's why I need your help. You've been with me for 20 years, Vincent. You're the only person I trust completely. Help me transition out. Find good people to take over the legitimate businesses. Sell off or shut down everything that isn't legal. Set up trusts and accounts that will support Sophia's future and compensate people I have obligations to. And help me disappear." "Disappear?" "Not literally," Marco clarified. "But I want to step back. Move somewhere quiet. Somewhere Sophia can go to a normal school and have a normal life. Somewhere people don't know who I am or what I've done." Vincent studied him carefully. "You're serious about this?" "I've never been more serious about anything. It's going to take time. Months, maybe a year to do it right." "I have time," Marco said. "And while we're doing it, I'm going to focus on Sophia, on helping her heal." Emma's apartment was modest, but it had something Marco's penthouse lacked: warmth. The furniture was second-hand but comfortable. The walls were decorated with photographs and small pieces of art that clearly meant something to the owner. A bookshelf overflowed with well-worn paperbacks. The kitchen smelled like something homemade. Chicken soup, Marco realized. The kind of comfort food that came from hours of patient cooking. "Thank you for inviting us," Marco said, watching Sophia settle onto the couch with a book Emma had given her. "Of course," Emma said, ladling soup into bowls. "You've been coming to the diner for 6 weeks now. I figured it was time to expand our horizons." It had become routine. After that first month, they'd continued meeting at Miller's Diner every morning. But they'd also started spending time together outside those breakfasts. Emma had taken Sophia to the library, to the park, to small museums where a quiet child could wander and process and slowly come back to life. Marco had been hesitant at first, trusting anyone in his world was dangerous. But Emma had earned that trust through consistent, patient kindness. She'd never asked him for anything, never tried to leverage their relationship into something more. She was simply there, a steady presence helping his daughter heal. "Can I ask you something?" Marco said as they sat at Emma's small kitchen table while Sophia read in the other room. "Of course. Why do you do this? I know you said it makes Tyler's life matter, but it's more than that, isn't it? You've given up so much of your time, your energy. You barely know us." Emma was quiet for a moment, stirring her soup. "After Tyler passed, I was angry at the world, angry at the driver who took him from me, angry at fate, at God, at everything. I spent months just existing, going through the motions. The grief counselor I saw told me that I needed to find meaning in the pain, that trauma could either destroy you or transform you. She paused, choosing her words carefully. I chose transformation. I looked at my pain and I thought, what can this teach me? What can I learn from this that might help someone else? And what I learned was how to recognize when someone is drowning, how to see past the surface to the real suffering underneath, how to offer kindness without expectation of return. But why us specifically? Marco pressed. Emma smiled sadly. Because the first time I saw Sophia, I saw myself, that blank look, that complete withdrawal from the world. That's what I looked like for months after Tyler died. And I saw you, desperately trying to reach someone you loved but not knowing how. And I thought, maybe I can help. Maybe this is why I survived my loss, so I could help them survive theirs. Marco felt his throat tighten. You saved her life. You know that, right? If you hadn't reached her, if you hadn't helped her find a way back, you would have found another way. Emma interrupted. Parents who love their children always do. I just happened to be in the right place at the right time with the right experience to help. I want to pay you, Marco said. Please, let me set up an account or pay off your apartment or… No, Emma said firmly. I told you from the beginning. This isn't about money. Then what can I do? How can I thank you properly? Emma looked toward the living room where Sophia was curled up on the couch, peacefully reading. Keep being her father. Keep showing up. Keep doing the hard work of helping her heal. That's all the thanks I need. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, eating soup and listening to the sounds of the city outside Emma's window. I'm leaving, Marco said finally. The business, the life, all of it. I'm transitioning everything so I can focus on being a father. A real father. Emma's eyebrows rose. That's a big decision. It's the only decision, Marco said. I can't keep living in a world where my daughter is at risk, where violence is always one wrong move away. She deserves better. She deserves a father who picks her up from school and helps with homework and goes to parent-teacher conferences. Normal things. Safe things. Where will you go? I don't know yet. Somewhere quiet. Somewhere we can start over. He hesitated. Will you stay in touch? Sophia's gotten so attached to you. I don't want her to lose another important person. Emma smiled. Of course. Distance doesn't matter these days. We have phones, video calls, all of that. And who knows? Maybe I'll visit wherever you end up. I've always wanted to travel more. You'd be welcome, Marco said. Always. 3 months after Sophia's testimony, the trial began. The evidence was overwhelming. Sophia's video testimony was shown in a closed courtroom, with only the judge, jury, attorneys, and necessary personnel present. The footage was devastating. A 5-year-old child calmly describing how 3 men had taken her mother's life while she hid in terror. The defense tried to argue that the testimony was unreliable, that Sophia had been coached or confused, that the trauma had distorted her memories. But the forensic evidence backed up every detail she'd provided. The timeline matched. The descriptions matched. The surveillance footage from neighboring properties, while not capturing the incident itself, showed the Moretti brothers entering and leaving the property at the exact time Sophia had described. The trial lasted 6 weeks. The verdict took the jury 3 hours. Guilty on all counts. Marco wasn't in the courtroom when the verdict was read. He was at a small house in Vermont, watching Sophia play in the snow. They'd moved there a month earlier, a modest home in a quiet town where nobody knew who they were or what they'd come from. Sophia had enrolled in the local elementary school under a different last name, just another kid trying to catch up after a difficult year. When his phone rang with news of the verdict, Marco felt nothing. No satisfaction, no sense of victory, just relief that it was over, that Sophia would never have to testify again, that the men who'd taken Isabella's life would spend the rest of theirs in prison. Daddy, look, Sophia called from the yard, holding up a lopsided snowball. I made a snowball. Marco pocketed his phone and went outside. That's a great snowball. Are you going to throw it? Sophia grinned, a real grin, the first he'd seen in over 6 months, and launched the snowball at him. It fell apart mid-flight, but Marco acted like he'd been hit anyway, staggering dramatically. Sophia laughed. Actually laughed. The sound was like music. You got me, Marco said, falling into the snow. I'm down. You win. Sophia ran over and collapsed next to him, both of them lying in the snow and looking up at the gray winter sky. Daddy? Yeah, baby? Are we going to be okay? Marco turned his head to look at his daughter. She was still too thin, still had shadows under her eyes, still woke up sometimes screaming from nightmares. But she was here. She was talking. She was laughing. She was healing. Yeah, he said. We're going to be okay. 6 months later, on a warm June morning, Emma drove up to Vermont for a visit. She'd kept in touch via video calls, watching from a distance as Sophia slowly transformed from a traumatized child into something approaching a normal 6-year-old. But this was her first in-person visit since they'd moved. The house was small, but charming, with a garden out front where Sophia had helped plant vegetables. Sophia came running out when Emma's car pulled up, throwing herself into Emma's arms with an enthusiasm that made Emma's heart swell. "Emma, you're here. Daddy said you were coming, but I didn't know if you were really coming, but you're really here." "I'm really here," Emma laughed, hugging Sophia tight. "I missed you so much." "I missed you too. Come see my room and the garden, and there's a creek behind the house where we found tadpoles. And I'm in 1st grade now, and I have a friend named Maya, and we play at recess every day, and—" "Slow down," Emma said, laughing. "I'm here for the whole weekend. We have time to see everything." Marco appeared in the doorway, looking more relaxed than Emma had ever seen him. He wore jeans and a flannel shirt, a far cry from the expensive suits he'd worn in New York. His face had filled out slightly. The stress lines around his eyes softened. "Welcome," he said, taking Emma's bag. "Sorry about the enthusiastic greeting. She's been talking about your visit all week." "I wouldn't want it any other way," Emma said. They spent the weekend like old friends. Marco showed Emma around the town, the small downtown with its mom-and-pop shops, the library where Sophia had a library card, the school where she was thriving. Emma met Sophia's teacher, Ms. Rodriguez, who had no idea that this polite, creative student had spent months unable to speak. "She's doing wonderfully," Ms. Rodriguez told them during an impromptu meeting. "Very bright, very kind to the other children. She's a bit quiet sometimes, but she's coming out of her shell more every day." That evening, they had dinner together. Marco grilled burgers while Sophia showed Emma every drawing she'd made in the past 6 months. The drawings had changed. The dark, violent images had been replaced with sunshine, flowers, animals, and people with big smiles. After Sophia went to bed, Marco and Emma sat on the porch, watching fireflies dance in the gathering darkness. "You did it," Emma said. "You built her a new life." "We did it," Marco corrected. "None of this would have been possible without you. You showed me that there was another way, that throwing money at problems wasn't enough, that what Sophia needed was patience and presence and someone who understood that healing isn't linear." "She's an amazing kid," Emma said. "Strong and resilient. She was always going to find her way back. I just helped her find the door." "The chocolate heart," Marco said with a small smile. "The chocolate heart," Emma agreed. They sat in comfortable silence for a while. "What about you?" Marco asked. "How are you doing?" "Really?" Emma considered the question. "I'm okay. Better than okay, actually. Helping Sophia helped me too in ways I didn't expect. It reminded me that Tyler's life mattered, that the love I had for him, still have for him, isn't wasted. It's just redirected, transformed into compassion for others." "Do you still work at the diner?" "I do," Emma said. "But I'm also going back to school, studying child psychology. I figure if I have a gift for reaching traumatized kids, I should develop it properly." Marco smiled. "That's perfect. You'll be amazing at it." "We'll see," Emma said. "But yeah, I think it's the right path." The fireflies continued their dance. Somewhere in the distance, a dog barked. Normal sounds. Safe sounds. "Thank you," Marco said quietly, "for everything. For seeing Sophia when no one else could. For helping me see what kind of father I needed to be. For showing us both that even after terrible things happen, healing is possible." "You're welcome," Emma said. "But Marco, you did the hard part. You showed up every day. You made the difficult choice to leave your old life. You put Sophia first. That's what made the difference." The next morning, Emma woke to find Sophia already in the kitchen, helping Marco make breakfast. Well, helping, in the way 6-year-olds help, mostly making a mess and stealing bites of bacon. "Emma," Sophia said when she noticed her, "we're making pancakes. Chocolate chip pancakes." "My favorite," Emma said, settling at the kitchen table. When the pancakes were ready, Marco served them on simple ceramic plates. Nothing fancy, just everyday dishes from the local home goods store. But before he brought them to the table, he paused and looked at Emma. She understood immediately. She took the chocolate syrup bottle and, with careful movements, drew a small heart on Sophia's plate. Sophia's face lit up. "A chocolate heart. Just like at the diner. Just like at the diner," Emma confirmed. "Because hearts mean love," Sophia finished. She looked at Emma, then at her father, then back at Emma. I love you, Emma. Thank you for helping me. Emma's vision blurred with tears. I love you too, sweetheart. They ate breakfast together, Marco, Sophia, and Emma, like a makeshift family bound not by blood but by shared trauma and the healing that came from simple acts of kindness. The pancakes were good. The coffee was hot. The sun streamed through the kitchen window, warm and bright. After breakfast, they walked down to the creek Sophia had mentioned. It was shallow and clear, with smooth stones and, yes, plenty of tadpoles. Sophia showed Emma how to catch them gently in cupped hands, how to watch them for a moment, then release them back into the water. We don't keep them, Sophia explained seriously. They need to be free to grow into frogs. Emma smiled at the wisdom in that simple statement. Freedom to grow. Freedom to heal. Freedom to become what you were meant to be even after terrible things tried to stop you. As they sat by the creek watching Sophia splash and explore, Marco said quietly, She has nightmares sometimes still. About that night. About Isabella. That's normal, Emma said. Trauma like that doesn't just disappear. It becomes part of you. The goal isn't to forget. It's to learn to live with the memory without letting it control you. She talks about her mom now. Marco continued. Happy memories, funny stories. She's starting to remember Isabella as a whole person, not just that last terrible night. That's healing, Emma said. That's exactly what it looks like. They watched Sophia discover a particularly large tadpole and call out excitedly about it. I never thought I'd have this, Marco said. A normal morning, a happy kid, a life without constantly looking over my shoulder. You earned it, Emma said, by making hard choices, by putting her first. I had good teachers, Marco said, looking at Emma. When it was time for Emma to leave on Sunday afternoon, Sophia clung to her for a long time. Will you come back? Sophia asked, her voice small. Absolutely, Emma promised. And you can video call me anytime. Plus, your birthday is coming up in a few months. I'll definitely be here for that. Promise? I promise. As Emma drove away, she watched in the rearview mirror as Marco knelt down to Sophia's level, probably explaining that Emma would visit again soon, that they could call her whenever they wanted. That distance didn't mean goodbye. Emma thought about the morning 6 months ago when a desperate father and his silent daughter had walked into Miller's diner. She'd drawn a chocolate heart on a plate. Such a small gesture, really. 30 seconds of work, a bottle of syrup, and a simple shape. But small gestures could change everything. A moment of kindness could open doors that force never could. Sometimes the most powerful thing you could do was simply see someone's pain and acknowledge it. Not try to fix it, not minimize it, not rush past it. Just see it and say, I understand. You're not alone. That's what the chocolate heart had been. A message. I see you. I see your pain. You're not alone. And it had been enough. Epilogue. 2 years later, Marco stood at the back of the school auditorium, watching the second-grade play. Sophia was playing a tree in the school's production of The Wizard of Oz. Not the lead role, but she'd been so excited to be part of it. She stood on stage with her arms stretched out like branches, a crown of construction paper leaves on her head, absolutely beaming. In the seat next to him, Emma wiped away happy tears. She's so confident up there. I remember when she wouldn't even make eye contact. She's come a long way, Marco agreed. Vincent was there too. He'd made the drive up from New York for the play. He'd taken over the legitimate parts of Marco's former business and was running them honestly and well. They spoke regularly. Old friends who'd been through too much together to lose touch. She looks happy, boss, Vincent said quietly. She is happy, Marco said. We both are. After the play, they all went out for ice cream. Sophia, Marco, Emma, Vincent, and Sophia's friend Maya with her parents. They crowded into a booth at the local ice cream shop, a place that had terrible decor but excellent banana splits. Sophia sat between Marco and Emma, chocolate ice cream smeared on her face, talking a mile a minute about the play, and how nervous she'd been, and how the boy playing the Tin Man had forgotten his lines, and how Ms. Rodriguez had said they all did a great job. Emma caught Marco's eye across the table and smiled. He smiled back, a real, genuine smile that reached his eyes. Later, after Maya's family had left and Vincent had headed back to the city, Marco walked Emma to her car. Thank you for coming, he said. It meant a lot to Sophia, to both of us. I wouldn't miss it, Emma said. She's my girl too, you know. I know, Marco said, and I'm grateful for that, for you, for everything you've given us. Emma hugged him, a friend's hug, comfortable and warm. You gave yourself a second chance, Marco. You did the work. I just drew a chocolate heart. Best chocolate heart ever drawn, Marco said. Emma laughed. I don't know about that, but it did what it needed to do. She got in her car, but before she pulled away, Sophia came running up, her tree costume still on. Emma, I forgot to tell you. Next month we're having a family picnic at school and you have to come, Daddy. Emma has to come, right? Emma is always welcome, Marco said. If she can make it, I'll be there, Emma promised. As she drove away, Emma looked in the rearview mirror one last time. Marco had lifted Sophia onto his shoulders and they were walking toward their car, Sophia's laughter carrying on the warm evening air. A father and daughter healing together, building a life defined not by violence and loss but by love and possibility. Emma thought about Tyler, as she did every day, but the thought didn't hurt quite as much anymore. Instead, it felt like warmth, like his love had transformed into something that helped others, into compassion and understanding, and chocolate hearts drawn on plates for little girls who needed to remember that the world could still be gentle. I think you'd be proud, baby, she whispered to the memory of her son. I think you'd really like Sophia. She's special, just like you were. The sun was setting over Vermont, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. Emma rolled down her window and let the warm air wash over her. She had a long drive ahead, back to her apartment in Queens, back to her shifts at the diner and her classes at school, back to her own life. But she'd be back, for Sophia's picnic, for her birthday, for Christmas, for all the moments that mattered, because that's what family did. And somewhere along the way, in a diner in Queens with chocolate syrup and pancakes, and a grief that both women understood, they'd become family, not by blood, not by marriage, but by choice, by kindness, by a simple chocolate heart that had meant everything.